yet, but it is expected from all the sources we can hear that no one survived. In the crew, there were 3 trained pilots, an expert on lasers, a Hughes Aircraft Corporation engineer, and a Concord, New Hampshire schoolteacher, flying as the first U.S. citizen in space. That was Krista McAuliffe, where the media has been spending a lot of time concentrating on her over the last few days, and she herself expressed her delight at going into space. She's a gregarious person, volatile, lots of energy, wasn't put off at all by the delays, and was looking forward to giving 2 15-minute lessons from space to several million school children in the United States. The commander of the flight, who acknowledged the last communication with a Roger, was Francis Scobie, 46 years old. He commanded the flight and was making his 2nd space shuttle mission. Challenger's pilot was Mike Smith, 40 years old, a commander in the U.S. Navy. Also in the picture there is Ronald McNair, 36, was doing research on lasers at the time he was selected as an astronaut. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Ellison Onizuka, 39, a former aerospace engineer and pilot, taught courses at the Elite Air Force Test Pilot School in California. Astronaut Judy Resnick, 36 years old, a classical pianist who earned a doctorate in electrical engineering from the University of Maryland. Gregory Jarvis, 41, a Hughes aircraft engineer who was flying on Challenger to conduct tests on the effects of weightlessness on fluid carried in tanks. The experiments were designed to engineer new information on the design of liquid-fueled tanks. And Sharon Krista McAuliffe, up in the back row there, 2nd from the left. 37 years old, a Concord, New Hampshire high school teacher, the first private citizen selected in national competition to fly on the space shuttle. The crew from Challenger 25. We are now going to hear from Jake Garn, who flew on one of the shuttle missions, a test pilot, and he went up earlier, and he had some thoughts, Senator Jake Garn, he had some thoughts about this morning's tragedy.
Come from it. And the crew members that I knew so well, I would expect that they would want us to go ahead with the space program after we have gone through the proper investigations and analysis and know what happened.
How should we go about investigating those?
Well, obviously, you have to gather all of the data. It has been impounded at this point. There have to be a lot of studies, but there are some superbly qualified experts in this area that I think will be able to determine what the failure was.
Senator, you were on board the space shuttle. You felt that tremendous boost that you got. Now, from the telemetry that we heard, the voice data that we heard, they had just told the pilot to go to full throttle, and he had said he was throttling up. What happened at that moment?
You have a combination of the solid rocket booster power and liquid hydrogen and oxygen in the main tank. And because most of your thrust comes from the solid rocket boosters, while you're still in the atmosphere, you can exceed the maximum dynamic pressure. So the main engines are only at about 60% of power until you get further out of the atmosphere. And they had just been given the command to throttle up, and then you go to 104% or maximum power on the solids, or on the liquids. And so that is exactly what had taken place. They were high enough so they would not endanger the orbiter from too much pressure, and were given that order that they could proceed to increase the power.
What are some of the things that can go wrong at that moment?
Well, you have a very large external tank of very volatile liquid hydrogen and oxygen. And you're just simply, it's like in an automobile, you are putting more fuel. You're pushing down on the accelerator, you're putting more fuel to bring more power. And, of course, at this point, we don't know whether it was one of the solids, we don't know whether it was the liquid engines or not. Just no way to know at this point.
Senator, what was your opinion of the amount of missions that NASA had scheduled for this year? Do you think that they were capable of going ahead with 14 or 15 safely?
Yes, I think so. The major problem these last couple of missions has been weather. And that is something that NASA cannot control. But, yes, I think the program was mature enough that, and with the opening of the second pad, Pad B, which Challenger was launched from this morning, with 2 pads and also the addition of the 4th orbiter, yes, I think they were capable of that schedule.
Do you think it's going to make any difference to civilians in space from now on?
Well, I can't judge what decisions NASA will make, but my own opinion, again, after the investigations, we should proceed with the program, and that would include the civilians in space program as well.
As a civilian yourself going in, were you adequately warned that something like this could happen?
Oh, of course. The training is very thorough and very adequate. In my own case, having flown more than 10,000 hours, I was certainly aware that there are dangers in flying. However, I still feel very strongly that I'm much safer in flying an aircraft than any day that I'm on the Capital Beltway, and I don't mean that to be facetious at all. We kill nearly 50,000 people a year on the in the highways of this country because of half of them because of drunk driving. I wish we'd pay a lot more attention to that.
Senator, should there have been some way for them, or was there any way for them to get out at this point? Should there have been?
No, I don't think so. In Columbia, originally, during the test phase, when just they were sending 2 test pilots up, they did have an escape capsule. The program had been proved safe enough, in my opinion, that they didn't need them in the other orbiters, and Columbia had been modified so that it did not have the escape mechanism in it. This is purely my opinion, but in watching what happened this morning, I would doubt very much, even if you had an escape capsule on board or parachutes, that it would have been possible to get out with that kind of an explosion in any event.
Senator, in light of all the delays surrounding recent shuttles and this one, do you think that NASA may have been too anxious to get this one off the ground?
No, I was down on Saturday and for the launch on Sunday morning, and they were criticized on Sunday for being overly careful. Safety has always been foremost in their minds. And we woke up on Sunday morning after having canceled at 10 o'clock the night before to a perfect morning. It was beautiful, sunny, clear blue skies, perfect launch, and there was a lot of talk that rather irritated me. Well, NASA was overly cautious. And so, no, I don't think that's true at all.
What happens in your subcommittee now in terms of funding for the program?
Well, I can't answer that question exactly because of Graham Rudman and the other budget constraints, but I certainly have no intentions other than to push on and does not change the intent or the progress of the program.
How do you think the investigation ought to be handled, Senator? Should there be some sort of blue ribbon panel put together, or should NASA be allowed to handle it?
Well, I think NASA has the technical experts, and if they need more than in-house, they will pull them in. I don't think we need to go outside that other than to draw on consultants if necessary. NASA is so thorough and so careful. If any of you had experienced how they go through the redundancy and the backups and careful nature, the dedication of these scientists and engineers in NASA, I have full faith in them. They want the program to succeed. They want to take care of their astronauts. It's always a real team effort. They work closely together, and they will want to find out what happened more than anybody else.
Senator, how lucky did you feel today that you returned safely?
Well, I don't feel particularly lucky. I think the program is reliable. In all programs, in flight test programs for aircraft, we have accidents. And I don't, it's a surprise to me that it happened, but I would go again tomorrow. If NASA would let me go, I would go again.
What effect is this likely to have on the community of astronauts?
Well, first of all, they're all such a close-knit group. They're not looking any beyond today except the sorrow of losing some of their companions. You go through each one. I knew Kristen McAuliffe the least of them because she wasn't there. Greg Jarvis I trained with. Dick Scobie I knew. Mike Smith was my mother hen, and you go on Azuka flew in January last year when I was flying, so it's where they live together all the time, they train together, they fly together. There's obviously utter shock and disbelief down at Houston today among the astronaut corps.
On your mission, was the crew equipped with parachutes and were there ejection seats?
No. Only Columbia had them at the beginning of the mission, just during the first, I don't remember, 3 or 4 missions.
Senator Jay Garn.
Thank you very much.
But you've had a chance to see what actually happened there today. We do have one little piece that we talked a little bit earlier today about speculation. Dr. Max Faget, who is the head of the team that designed the shuttle and who does not work for NASA now, said he does not believe that anything about the cause of the explosion can be discerned on these tapes that we have been seeing on the air. And he says that based on what he has been seeing on television, there isn't any evidence that would help us pinpoint the cause of the explosion. It's very important because, in part because we have perhaps been on the air for some considerable period of time, there has been a tendency to speculate a little. So I just want to quote Dr. Faget there, who was one of the team that designed the shuttle. He does not believe that anything about the cause of the explosion can be discerned from any of the tapes that have been playing on the air. ABC's Lynn Scher at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or out in California at least, not at the Jet Propulsion Lab. Yes, Lynn?
Peter, I also just got some information about Max Faget, coincidentally, and it's my information that he has said he simply has no idea. He, of course, being a man largely responsible for designing the shuttle. I wanted to add a couple of things, and it's along the same line. We've talked about, let's narrow it down, the three possibilities that could have caused this thing. One, that was one of the solid rocket boosters. Two, that it was one of the main engines. Let me show you on the model. Perhaps it was one of the two solid rocket boosters. Perhaps it was a main engine that simply let go and caused the fire, or perhaps it was the external tank itself that ruptured. I think the important thing to keep in mind, it has been pointed out to me, is that this was so catastrophic that it is probably not an engineering problem, i.e., these structures just don't fall apart like that, or they're certainly not meant to. There is no history to indicate that they would do that. Yes, we have seen that flame at about the midpoint or the lower third of the tank. Whether the flame started there and there was a rupture in the tank or a fuel line that caused it, or whether, in fact, that's a secondary reaction from an explosion in one of the engines or somewhere else, we simply don't know. And I think the quote you were reading from Dr. Faget is obviously to the point. One
Lynn,
final note. Yeah.
He also does say, having said that he can't see anything on the tape, he also say the flame observed between the shuttle and the external tank could be a fire inside the shuttle burning through the skin. Has anybody else suggested that to you?
Nobody has suggested that to me. That is one area that I haven't heard of. But the flames, sure, it could have started anywhere, but there are flames around the engine. There are flames around the edges of the solid rocket boosters. There is enough heat generated there that if any of the liquid hydrogen or oxygen were to escape from the main tank, that would obviously cause that kind of explosion. The only good news in all of this, and